Welcome to Find Happiness podcast brought to you by Happy Life. We're dedicated to helping individuals like yourself on their journey to finding happiness and fulfillment. Our guest today is Matt Gwinn, a recovering addict who has spent time living off the grid, hitchhiking around the country, and was even in a cult for a time, disguised as a business. Despite their challenges, despite these challenges, he has managed to build a family and become an entrepreneur. He will be sharing with us his journey towards recovering and how he's come to terms with his past experiences. So let's sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired by our guest's journey towards happiness. And as always, remember that Happy Life is here to support you on your journey to finding happiness and fulfillment in your life. Welcome, Matt Gwinn. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, so, can you tell us about your experience with addiction and how it led you to live in the woods and hitchhiking around the country?
So I started taking LSD when I was 12. That
Hmm.
was the first drug I've ever done. Um, so I definitely started hard and I started young. And I actually didn't even start smoking cigarettes until probably a year or two after that. Um, was at Boy Scout summer camp, and a buddy of mine offered me some acid instead of going to the last um, campfire that they held. The
Yeah.
one where everybody's all, I'm gonna miss you. We'll see you next year. All that BS. And I get tripping balls sounded like a way more fun time than that. So it was that. And then I saw, a couple years later, I was probably 14 or 15. I saw the movie Scarface, and
Okay.
that kind of, I was like, man, if I do what he did, I just don't get high on what I'm selling. I should have a pretty good life, Fuck all this other stuff. Excuse my language, by the way, if it offends people, but I'm pretty blunt and straightforward about a lot of this. Um,
Okay.
I just, that kind of spurred me into selling drugs and becoming more involved in that particular lifestyle. By the time I was 16 and a half, I think, I decided, being in Ohio, which is where I kind of grew up. I'm originally from West Virginia.
Yeah.
Uh, I decided, was enough, and I didn't feel like being at home, so I left home and just kind of hopped around, Ohio for a while. Uh, right before I turned 18, I did 2 months in rehab.
Okay.
That
Oh.
didn't work. Um, Not at all. I made some pretty bad decisions. Didn't follow other people's advice. I even got high while I was in rehab. Which isn't easy to do whenever you're locked into a building. But a guy managed to smuggle in some marijuana, so we smoked it
Woo.
on an outing. And as soon as I got out, I pretty much went back to it. I pretended to be sober for a little while, but there was no clean time there. There really wasn't. Shortly after that is whenever I started hitchhiking around the country. I started, I had been to some of the Grateful Dead esque shows, like Phil Lesh and Friends and Rat Dog and Fish and some of those other guys, and I just decided to start following them. And in that process, I found a group called the Rainbow Family. It's a bunch of hippies who live on national forest property all over the United States. I just traveled with them. It was nice. You're out in the woods. You don't really have to worry about much. Everybody's friendly, and it's a nice community to be in. Not the cult. This wasn't the cult at all. Honestly, I mean, if I could have managed to make that last, I probably would have. But after a couple years of that, it kind of got a little old. Not the lifestyle itself. I just wanted to go back to Ohio at that point and just do something different. I was kind of a nomad, and so I went back to Ohio. On September 11th, whenever the Twin Towers got attacked, I was living in a teepee in the forest in Colorado.
Okay.
Um, we actually saw Air Force One fly overhead with a whole bunch of fighter jets because we were relatively close to Cheyenne Mountain, which is where NORAD and all the missiles and stuff are stored.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how we knew something happened. And then probably 6 months later is whenever I went back to Ohio.
Okay. Wow. That must have been a lot of experience.
Quite a bit.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So, can you talk about your time in cult and how you ended up leaving?
Yeah, man. So I, around the age of 21 ish, I don't know. I don't really remember exact years or dates or anything, but I realized that the lifestyle I had been living was basically just me profiting off ruining other people's lives.
Hmm.
And I just couldn't do that anymore. I've been selling drugs for years, such a huge part of that lifestyle. I didn't want to do it anymore. I mean, it kind of was counter to the morals that had developed in me by that point.
Okay.
So I moved into a cardboard box by some railroad tracks. Started looking for a job. And I found a job selling magazines all across the country.
Okay.
And it was a great experience, honestly. I mean, I learned a lot about business, how to run a business, how to sell. I definitely gained a lot of life skills that I didn't have at that point because of my years of drug abuse. But even though I gave up dry drugs, I was still smoking a lot of marijuana. We were drinking every single night. I mean, I was still running an active addiction. It just was socially acceptable to my environment, so I didn't feel like I was actually an addict anymore. I thought I was in recovery. And it wasn't until many years later. It's probably left that over 10 years ago. It would probably be 12 or so years, I think, at this point. That I realized that it was, if not a cult, definitely cultish. Because a lot of what we did was centered around books like The Secret, which was written by a cult, and just some of that programming, some of the ways that we operated. Like if you wanted to leave, you were gone. There was no waiting. There was no saying goodbye. You were just gone. You know. And I've come to learn that a lot of cults operate that way too. Whenever you're Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, some of those are. If you leave, you just don't exist anymore, and that's how we operated. If you're there, you're there. If you're not, fuck off. When I left, it was a little bit more civil. I'd been there for a really long time, and I just felt like it was time for me to go. The business was no longer going in a direction again that I could morally stand behind. Too many people were lying about what they were doing, and it no longer felt okay. I didn't see any point about lying about what we did because I thought it was really cool. My job was to travel around the country, sit on people's couches, and talk them into buying a magazine, eating their food, drinking their water, and I just had a good time. Like that was my whole job. Why lie about that? That's pretty awesome. Not too many people get an opportunity to travel all over their country and get paid for it, right? So, because people were saying they were doing it for the local college or the local high school or whatever they were saying,
Yeah.
I didn't feel like it was okay anymore. So, I had my own vehicle. I had an open job offer from a newspaper in Arkansas. So I took it. And I was like, look, I feel like it's my time. I said goodbye to all my friends and stuff, which was really counter to what it had been before, where you just got dropped off at a bus station and you were done. And I left, hopped in my car and I drove away. That was it.
Oh, great, great. What was the turning point though? Like, what 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 made you just make up your mind to? What was the turning point?
It was the
Something
fact that
was not
other
working.
managers in the company. So the way we were organized is there was the clearinghouses, right? The people who actually published the magazines, printed them, distributed them, that kind of thing. Uh, we owned our own individual companies as managers for the clearinghouse, and too many of the other managers that I worked with uh, were becoming okay with their people lying, going door to door. And I considered myself and still consider myself a professional salesman. I don't believe in lying about your product. If you can't sell your product on your product's merits, you probably shouldn't be selling it.
Oh, I get you.
So it had gotten to the point to where you couldn't go to cities that had always been okay with us working there, because they would just run you out because of other people's actions. Robberies were becoming a lot more common. Elderly abuse was becoming very common. And just like whenever I quit, selling drugs 10 years before I left, selling magazines, uh, it just wasn't something I could morally do anymore. I couldn't hire somebody, teach them how to do the job when I knew they would be around 10 to 20 other people who weren't doing it the way that I wanted, which was honest.
Okay, okay.
So, it was just time. It was time for me to go. And um I'm happy I got out whenever I did because, it took probably 2 or 3 more years and the business is just basically gone. It doesn't really exist anymore, especially with COVID. Most of those people that I knew who were running their own companies have moved on to other things like selling, energy solutions door to door or roofs or whatever. They're still in the door to door industry, and I just, although I stayed in the door to door industry myself for a little while, I ended up leaving that. Just in
Okay.
general, I got tired of knocking on people's doors, walking around. I wanted something that honestly was a little bit easier.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, so let me rephrase the question. So what I meant was, what was the turning point that what made you just make up your mind? Like, okay, you know what, I'm leaving cultism. What was the turning point? That's what I meant.
I mean, it was the morality of it.
Okay.
It no longer meshed with what I believed.
Okay.
What I had been originally taught when I first started the business no longer applied.
Okay.
Right? I mean, when I first entered the business, if you caught somebody uh, doing hard drugs, selling drugs to other people in the company, lying at doors, you would be lucky if we took you to the police station and turned you in. Right? There was a strict moral code that we had, and by the time I left, nobody gave a shit if you did hard drugs,
Mm-hmm.
which was something I didn't want to do and I didn't want to be around.
Okay.
Nobody cared if you lied. None of that. I mean, I remember people getting beaten up because we found out they were taking donations from people instead of doing their job.
Oh, okay, okay.
And at the
That's fair.
time, that was cool. Looking back, it wasn't. But that's how, intensely we felt the morality of what we were doing. There were so many other companies that existed out there who a lot of these actions, the lying and the drugs and that kind of thing, were okay for. For us, it wasn't. It was something we wanted to be different. And after 10 years, we weren't anymore. And I didn't want to participate in it.
Okay, okay. That's clear. That's clear now. I was just asking because of the audience. I wanted a very clear definition or clear description of what you were talking about. So how has it been starting your family, and how has starting your family impacted your journey towards recovery?
Well, I mean, so I still didn't get clean, really. Um, I kept drinking, I kept smoking weed. Um, I never stopped, even whenever I left. Um, I met my wife about 11 years ago now, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. She already had two kids. I ended up moving in with her. Got a job managing AT&T retail locations. Running the cell phone industry, stores. But just kept drinking, kept smoking all the time. I was drinking sometimes a bottle of whiskey a night.
Can relate.
Constantly stoned. Um, and I don't know how I held it together, and I certainly don't understand why she stayed with me for as long as we've been together. I guess at first, while we were still in Arkansas for the first 8 years, it wasn't so bad for her. It didn't really get bad until we moved back to Ohio, to where my mom lived, because she wanted the grandbabies to be closer. We had had a daughter at that point. I think she was 5 whenever we moved back. She's 7 now, soon to be 8 in about 6 months, I think, roughly. Uh, and just being back here in my original environment, I slowly started to slide back into old habits. Uh, the work ethic started to drain. Um, it just became easy to fall back on some of those older habits that I had, even though I didn't start doing hard drugs until we moved out of my mom's house finally. Uh, and then it was rare. I mean, it wasn't an everyday thing. It wasn't an every week thing. It wasn't even an every month thing. Occasionally would do some coke here and there or eat some hallucinogens or what have you. But the drinking just started to go off the rails. Um, and, the pandemic here happened. That didn't help uh, at all. Because drinking was about all I had to do, and I wasn't spending any time with my family anymore at all. I was in my studio constantly, working on music, working on a podcast, doing this, doing that. And I was rationalizing it as, I'm doing something that will benefit my family in the future. I just have to keep doing this, and eventually they'll understand. And that's not really how it works. It's not how it works being a part of a family and having kids. Uh, and then I got a really awesome job that I have now. It's my day
Oh,
job.
okay.
Um, and I started working from home. So I literally never had to leave home.
Okay.
So it got so bad that I was dropping my daughter off at school and telling myself not to stop and get beer on my way home. But I was telling myself that as I was walking out of the store with beer in a bag. Um, I could legally smoke marijuana because of some PTSD and depression and other issues that I had. So I was able to rationalize that. I'm taking medicine. This is prescribed by a doctor. But my alcoholism was just completely off the rails. And so was me smoking weed, to be completely honest. It may not be physically addictive, but because I'm an addict, I was abusing it. And one day I was getting ready to log into work, and I realized, I had to stop, or I was gonna die. And what saved me and helped me get to that point, because I'd tried to commit suicide many times before this over the last 2 years of my active use, was my daughter, honestly.
Okay.
Um, I would be hanging from something and I just couldn't. She would flash in my mind and I couldn't do to her what that would do. So after a couple times of trying to kill myself and realizing I didn't have the balls to do it because I couldn't hurt my family like that. I figured just drinking myself to death would be my best option. So I went for it. But then one day, it was actually last October at the end of the month, October 28th, well, 27th, I just broke down. I couldn't do it anymore. I called my job and said, hey, look, I'm going to go to rehab. I understand if I can't keep my employment. You know, my personal business had completely fallen apart at this point. That wasn't even, I couldn't even do it anymore. I had given up my radio show. I was no longer playing music live anywhere. I was no longer doing my podcast. I wasn't producing anything. And I told my boss, I was like, look, I need to go to treatment of some kind. I have to go. I'm drunk right now. Go about the clock into work. Like, I can't continue to do this. And I was really lucky. And they gave me 30 days of a leave of absence. They said, go take care of what you need to take care of. And I called my mom. And I was like, look, I need you to come pick me up and take me to this facility who's going to take me in. And she did. And at that point, whatever happened was going to happen, you know. I figured the only thing I could focus on at that time was just stopping. So that's what led me to being a clean man and not doing anything. I mean, I don't know. Even though I was prescribed cannabis, I didn't go back to it while I was in detox, which I only stayed for a week. In the rehab facility because of some issues I was having just being there around a bunch of people who weren't trying to enter recovery, and I could tell.
Oh, okay.
They prescribed me something that took care of my depression, it took care of my PTSD, it took care of everything. And when I got out, I asked my therapist, I was like, man, should I leave the cannabis alone? He's like, yeah, because of these other drugs that you're taking that are helping you. It'll just counteract all that. You'll go right back to where you were. So I quit that too. And now I'm only taking a few drugs that are prescribed by my doctor, following their recommendations incredibly closely. So I don't abuse them. None of them are actually drugs I think you can abuse. But I've been clean ever since.
Oh, great. So if I picked up anything from what you were saying, one of the major things that made you to say you were not going to do that again was thinking about your daughter, right?
Yeah, it was ultimately my kids and my wife, you know. I mean,
Okay, nice.
I had been through the process of recovery before, like I said.
I was going to ask.
So when I had my moment of clarity on October 27th, part of that was I'm incredibly lucky right now. I still have a job. I still have vehicles, a home. I still have my family. For whatever reason, I still have all these things.
Okay, that's great.
Most people who hit that point in addiction, because I had been in active addiction for 27 years at this point, they don't have any of that.
Yeah.
Usually you're on the street. You're dirty as hell. You're not I mean, life is just awful everywhere. And you become desperate enough to quit. And for me, it wasn't as much desperation as the realization that my higher power, for whatever reason, had stuck it out and allowed me to continue to have these things. And just like when I quit selling drugs, just like when I quit, when I left magazines, I had this moment of clarity that I'm abusing everything around me. And I couldn't morally accept that anymore. So I knew I had to quit.
Yeah, you did the right thing, and I'm proud of you. Very proud of you. Very proud of you.
I mean,
Okay.
you can't live a life spiritually bankrupt, which is what I was doing. It just doesn't work. It doesn't matter what your spirituality is. You have to have some kind of spiritual connection to the world around you in order to really have any joy in your life.
Yeah, you're right. Right. Okay, so let me even say this. Can you talk about some of the biggest challenges you've faced in overcoming addiction and how you've worked to overcome them? And would you mind specifying the kind of addiction and drug?
Sure. So as far as the drugs I did, I mean, you can basically get a list of drugs and throw a dart at it, and I did it.
Mhm.
I would do drugs I didn't even know what they did. Um, back when I was doing hard dry drugs. I was even a part of a group of people in the United States who were experimenting with the next wave of hallucinogens that would be coming to market. I was a chemist. So, LSD, cocaine, meth, heroin, ecstasy, uh, cannabis. Literally, if you can think about it, I did it. Molly, 2CB, 2CI, 2TT7, 2TTY. I mean, the list is insanely long. Um, and it was a progression of giving up a lot of things. So I quit the dry drugs first, kept going with cannabis and alcohol and occasional drug use. Hard drugs, dry drugs, whatever you want to call them. Since I've been clean and actually gotten clean, it really hasn't been a challenge, to be honest.
Oh, okay, okay.
I'm done, which is really hard, a really hard place in and of itself to get to.
Yeah.
The hardest part, the biggest challenge that I had was giving up. So, as an addict, you want to be in control. That's part of why you do drugs, right? You don't like how you feel.
Yeah.
You can't stop how you feel. You can't deal with your trauma that you've experienced. So you get high to numb that. And it takes over your life and you lose control. But you think you're in control. So the very first thing you have to do is surrender to whatever higher power there is out there for you.
Yeah.
Really doesn't matter what you name it, you know. You just have to be willing to give up. And that may not make sense to a lot of people,
It will. It will.
but you're not really giving up. You're giving up on that old way of life and accepting that there is something else out there that's better, and you are willing to do as anything that you can to find out what that is. I was lucky that I knew what to do from the years I had spent in rehab and the time I had spent in Alcoholics Anonymous. Even though I wasn't really clean then, I still had some kind of foundation. I was incredibly lucky. Because when I got a chance to go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings whenever I was still in detox, I went. And that was the realization that this is where I need to be. It was one of the reasons I only stayed long enough to detox, was that I was surrounded by all these other addicts in this facility. And the longer I was clean, the more I realized these people have no real desire to actually be clean.
Yeah.
They're fighting with the nurses over their medication. They're fighting with each other over their place in line over medication. They're, just in general, not participating in their own recovery.
Yeah.
Which is important. It's super important. It's all about you. You have to do it yourself. No one can do it for you. So, I talked to some people. I talked to the man who introduced me to Narcotics Anonymous in the area that I live in. And I realized that I needed to get out of there and just start going to meetings.
Okay.
And start actually working to recover myself. Get a sponsor, start working the 12 steps, find some fellowship with other human beings, which I had completely lost. Force myself to come back out of my shell, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of those have been challenges. But I'm applying as much effort to this as I did to being an active drug addict. And as long as you put forth that same amount of effort, you're willing to do anything, nothing's really a challenge because you may not have a good day. You know, you may feel like using, but as long as you focus on the core principles that you get from either Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, whatever program you find that's helping you stay clean, you will. Put some faith in that higher power, whatever you want to call it. And even if it's just by the minute, you just focus on not using. That's really all it takes at
Yeah.
first, is just not picking up drugs.
Great, 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 great. Okay, so I think the major thing I'm taking out of this is if you want to stop drugs, you just need to make up your mind. And if there are higher powers you think can help you, you need to hinge on these higher powers. You just have to find a way. Just have to find a way.
You do. I mean, even if your higher power is something like Narcotics Anonymous, just the group, you know, that's something bigger than you. It's a proven method. So, you know, whatever it takes. That's just what you got to do. You just have to stop.
Okay, yeah, makes a lot of sense. So let me move on to the next. Can you tell us about your entrepreneurial pursuits and how they have helped you in your recovery process?
Well, by getting clean, I could get back to my business, albino rhino media,
Awesome.
which is nice. You know, I missed it. I'm a musician. Uh, I love hosting a podcast. I enjoy the entertainment industry as a whole. And by the time I, quit, October 27th was the last day that I used, I wasn't able to do any of that. So now that I am clean, I brought my podcast back, The Adventures of the Albino Rhino, and now it focuses on people who are in recovery, people who help provide means of recovery to other people, people who have grown up living in an environment where their parents were addicts, or maybe their spouse was an addict. It's very centered upon recovery, because I want people to see my journey, because it is a journey.
Yeah,
It's
it's
an
a journey.
adventure. If it's not something that happens in one day or 1 year. It's something I'm going to spend the rest of my life working at. So, getting clean has allowed me to get back to doing what I love. On Mondays we release the podcast, my interview with people. On Thursdays we release an hour of house music, so dance music, which is I'm a DJ primarily. Just to show people that you can enjoy that kind of music clean.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a very large, drugs are a very large part of the rave and club culture. So, just showing people that it's possible to enjoy that and not be whacked out of your mind. And the week we're actually recording your episode, I'll be launching an hour of drum and bass on Saturdays. So we'll
Okay.
have 3 shows coming out a week.
Awesome.
One's an interview to her music. Um, I have my radio show that I do in the United Kingdom every Tuesday. Uh, I'm able to do what I love again. In 2023, I'm going to start playing live again, so I can, start bringing in income again
We're already in
from that.
2023.
Yeah, I know. It's I'm working on getting some bookings set up in February. I've got a few things to
Awesome.
take care of.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm able to do what I enjoy, and I can use that as a vehicle to attempt to bring recovery to other people,
Yeah.
um, which is important. You can't stay clean and by yourself. You have to do it with other people. It's just how it works.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Nice one. So, how have you been working on coming to terms with your past, and how has that impacted your mental health?
I'm in therapy. Um, I go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings multiple times a week, talk about my past. I have a sponsor that I'm working through the steps to. A large part of that is coming to terms with your past. Um, I've got trauma I've got to work through, both self inflicted and inflicted by other people.
Mhm.
Uh, it's a process. And just like I had to have faith that my higher power was going to help me stay clean,
Okay.
I have to have faith that even though at times I may be very uncomfortable and incredibly depressed and just feeling like complete garbage, uh, I gotta have faith that it'll pass. My higher power will help me through these moments. The people that I've become friends with in recovery as well can help me through these moments. Um, it's just a process and it takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And I
so
have to
true.
accept that.
Yeah. You need to accept life, and you need to keep pushing. Keep pushing makes the difference. Once you
In
stop
Narcotics
pushing,
Anonymous, we have a phrase. You have to come to terms with living life on life's terms.
okay.
And that's really important because you can't control your life, really. You could walk out your front door and get slammed by a car. I mean, things
I get,
happen with,
I get what you
you
mean.
know?
Life happens. Yeah,
Exactly.
life happens. Okay, so how do you approach maintaining a balanced lifestyle without drugs while still dealing with your past experience? Your past experiences, rather. So, in quotes,
Right.
like balanced life without drugs, and then past experiences.
Well, I wake up in the morning and I read literature about recovery. I journal about my previous day. Uh, I do a daily affirmation where I write down something that I like about myself. I set a
Yeah.
goal for myself for the day,
Mm-hmm.
so I have something to focus
Like
on.
that.
Um, Throughout the day, I just, make sure I don't pick up drugs, don't pick up alcohol. Um, I have a very strictly managed day. So my day is scheduled so that way there's a lot of structure to it. Um, and before I go to bed, I go back into that literature and I read again. So
Hmm.
that way I focus on recovery as soon as I wake up
Yeah.
and I focus on recovery right before I go to sleep.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome.
And I don't work on anything after a certain time of day. It's all family time.
Wow. That's good. That's so great.
And it helps me maintain a balance between the things I want to do, the things I need to do, and spending time with my family. which is important.
Yeah, very important. Wow. This has been so educating, honestly. I believe that the viewers out there will be picking points, writing down all of this. You're really doing a great job right here. Honestly, I appreciate this. I appreciate having
You're
you
very
here.
welcome.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
I'll
Thanks
push.
for having me.
Yeah, I'll push further. How do you suggest others who are struggling with addiction and depression to start their journey of recovery? Remember, one of the reasons why I find happiness is doing this is because a lot of people do not have access to mental health care and how to get off depression. So that's why we bring people like you here to say your experiences, tell them your personal stories, how you got off depression and all of that, to make sure that since they can't afford this, they can just get first-hand information from people like you. So let's go.
Well, you know, if you're an addict,
Mm-hmm.
find Narcotics Anonymous. It's pretty much everywhere. Since the pandemic, there's even virtual meetings. So if you have an internet connection, you can find Narcotics Anonymous meetings now. Um, and if you don't have access to that, find someone who's not. I mean, uh, find a priest or some kind of religious leader or um, town doctor or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Just find someone that you can admit that you have a problem to. But first, with depression, with anxiety, with addiction, with any of these mental health problems, you have to admit to yourself first that you have a problem
Yeah.
and that you
Important.
can't manage it yourself. Because, yeah, you can, you know, push down the depression, you can ignore the anxiety, but it'll eventually build up until it becomes too much. And if you don't admit that it's become too much, it'll take over.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to admit that it's a problem for you and that you need help and just find it. I know Narcotics Anonymous is just about everywhere in the world. Uh, we actually, well, not we, Narcotics Anonymous just launched the Iranian website today. So, it doesn't matter what country, there is some sort of resource
Okay.
for
Yeah.
narcotics and for addicts now, um, where you can find other people who are like that. Um, and like I said, if you have an internet connection, you can find a Narcotics Anonymous meeting that you can join via Zoom anywhere in the world. I've been to meetings in Canada, Ireland, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Japan. Um, I don't even remember some of the countries that I've tried, just to experience how they deal with addiction in their country and how their groups work.
Okay.
Um, and at worst, if you have no one to lean on and uh, you don't have an ability to do Zoom meetings, but you have an internet connection, you can find the Narcotics Anonymous basic text in a PDF form. It's free in that form. Just read the book. Follow the advice.
Great.
It's a start,
Yeah.
you
Great.
know, but the most important part is that you start
Yeah.
doing something different than what you were doing before.
Yeah. Great, great, great. Um, so how do you think it's important for the society in general to come to terms with the fact that addiction is a disease?
Um, I mean, the longer it's demonized the way that it has been, and it's getting much, much better.
Mhm. Yeah,
But it's still demonized to a point, you know. Um, it's really hard for addicts to become productive members of society again
exactly.
when your only options, other than finding recovery through Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, there's a lot of anonymouses, right? Um, ultimately, if we end up in jail, an institution, or dead, we have no net value to the world around us. So, accepting that this is a mental health problem
Hmm.
allows addicts to begin the process of recovery, right?
Yeah,
Um, health insurance companies are finally starting to pay for people to go to rehab,
yeah.
and that's very recent. The first time I went to rehab, it was paid for by a nonprofit organization who just wanted people to get clean. My
Okay,
insurance
okay,
wouldn't cover it, you know, and my mom had great insurance, and I was a minor, so I was still on her insurance,
okay.
but they wouldn't cover me going to rehab. So my mom had to go outside of the means that she had. Uh, Now, when I went to rehab, my insurance covered it. That's 21 years later. It took 21 years for government insurance, which is what I had at the time, uh, to cover addiction recovery.
Yeah,
That's crazy. Because if you give people the opportunity to recover,
yeah.
they will. Because nobody wants to live a life of active addiction. They
At
just don't
all,
feel like there's any other way out.
at all, at all.
Because it's not easy. It's really hard walking through a blizzard to go get crack, you know? And I mean, being in the rain, the cold, the heat, all the environments that you have to exist in as a drug addict to get high, it's not easy. Stealing from people, using people that care about you, all the side effects of being an addict. When you can stop that, help that person stop being an active addict, all that other stuff goes away. All the crime, all the pain, all of it goes away.
I get you. Get you. So, to me, I think that addiction should be really demonized and painted the way it is. So, a lot of people would see it as it is and then start staying away from it, staying away from whatever puts them to the point where they get addicted and can't walk away. Because a lot of addicts know that within them they really want to stop what they're doing, but they just can't. Just can't. And it's good not to try. It's good never to go close to such things because the moment you do that, you're stuck in there and you need help to get out of it. So we're grateful that you're giving this information. Thank you so much. I'll ask you the last question because of time. Um, okay, so how have you been working on yourself to make sure that you're healthy, both physically and mentally?
Well, I quit doing drugs. That helps. Uh, I'm more physically active again,
Okay.
um, which is important. You can't just sit around all the time. And I spend a lot of time working on my mental health. Like I said,
Wow.
I journal every day. I write about my dreams.
Yeah.
Um, I make sure that I have a plan for the day. Uh,
Mhm.
I have a sponsor in Narcotics Anonymous who I talk to when I have a problem. He's helping me go through the steps in Narcotics Anonymous so that way I can, recover. Um, well, be in the process of recovering because it never stops. Um,
Yep.
I go to therapy. I'm honest
Okay.
with people. And it's very important that you're honest because it's super easy to lie and say that you're doing something. You know, it's super easy to say, well, that's not a problem for me. You have to admit and be honest with yourself and other people in order to make this work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I spend time around my family.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I'm trying to learn how to become a normal person, not being a normal person.
Awesome.
And I'm patient with myself.
Exactly.
That's very important as well. It's just there's three spiritual characteristics that Narcotics Anonymous tells people that are very important to be able to recover: honesty, open
Mm-hmm.
mindedness, and willingness.
Okay.
And as long as you can do those three things,
Mm-hmm.
especially at first, you're on your way.
Okay. So let's
So,
highlight these things again. Honesty, open-mindedness, and what's the last one?
willingness.
Willingness. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. So let that get into their minds. Let them hear it over and over. Okay,
It's
go ahead, please.
it's you have to be open to experience instead of trying to hide from it. You have to be honest about your experience and willing to do whatever it takes
Yeah,
to change. You know.
that's true. That's very, very true. Wow, Matt. As we come to the end of our interview today, would you be willing to share your contact information for anyone or to anyone who would like to reach out to you to learn more about your story? Because this is very important.
Yeah. So on Facebook, it's DJ Albino Rhino is our page. It's public. You can send me messages through there. I think I have a WhatsApp number on there, which I have no idea what it is, but uh, you can go and click on it. Um, my email address is albinorhinomedia@icloud.com.
Okay.
We also have a website that you can link to. It's insanely long, uh, but it's on the Facebook page as well. Um, and a lot of this information is also available on the podcast, which is Adventures of the Albino Rhino. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon. I mean, just about everywhere where there are podcasts, we're there. Um, and on our website, there's a contact form you can fill out. Um, I mean, if you're struggling with addiction, feel free to reach out.
Exactly. Okay. So, thank you so much for joining us on the Find Happiness podcast today. Honestly, your story is truly inspiring, and I am and we are grateful to have had the opportunity to share it with our listeners. Your courage and resilience in overcoming addiction and building a fulfilling life is truly an inspiration to many. I appreciate the insights and wisdom you shared with us today, and I know that it will have a positive impact on our listeners. Thank you so much.
You're
And
very welcome.
okay, and to our viewers, thank you for being a part of the Find Happiness podcast and for listening to our story. We wish you all the best in your continued journey towards happiness and fulfillment. Till next time, bye.